Hello guys, my name is Desmond and I welcome you to my lesson for today where we'll be looking at your mathematics November 2021 exam paper. So ladies and gentlemen, please do allow me to say it is very much important that I say it is very much important because what I'm about to say it's massively massively important, ladies and gentlemen, that I say a day without learning something new, it's a day wasted. By so saying, please do make sure that by the end of each and every lesson that I conduct, you learn something new. Very much important, ladies and gentlemen, over there. So without any waste of time, in today's lesson I'm going to quickly take you through question 1 of this exam paper. Most importantly, guys, please do make sure that you pay full attention to all the details. So again, I'm not going to be solving any of these problems, but what I'm going to do is just to take you through a way in which you approach this type of questions. So if you would like to join one of my live lessons where I solve these problems, just go on this video. Under the description section you might find a link and instructions that you might need to follow in order to join my live lesson. So during my live lessons, that's where you can directly engage with me by asking direct questions, and that's where you're going to find an explanation to each question that you'll be asking. Okay, so 1.1, it says solve for x. Good people do nothing but solve for x. So that means whatever that you do, in the end you must tell us what is the x value. In some questions you might find that you actually have two x values. Please do make sure to provide those two possible x values. So let's now have a look at our first question and do an interpretation of that one. Okay, guys, make sure to follow the numbering system used in the question paper. If it's 1.1 and the next question or sub-question says 1.1.1, please write it as it is. And most importantly, please do remember not to incorrectly copy the question. Make sure to copy the question exactly as it is. You don't want to copy it incorrectly and then you work it out correctly, but answering the wrong question. So just make sure to correctly copy that. And most importantly, guys, just make sure to be considerate of the marks allocated to each question. So you can see that question is allocated 3 marks, which means you are expecting to show 3 valid steps, which is where you are most likely to score your marks. So this type of a math problem is what we call a quadratic equation. What makes it to be a quadratic equation? It is because of having the power of 2. So any equation having a power of 2, we call it a quadratic equation. And this is the format that we know: ax squared plus bx, bx plus c equals to 0. Then we know that once we have that power of 2, we need to rewrite that given equation in this format. Once you've written it in that format, that's when you can now factorize or find the factors. So the question is that one in the standard form? How do you know it's in the standard form? That's when it follows that order and that, and then you have a constant there. Most importantly, it must be equated to 0, guys. If it is not equated to 0, then it means you will need to transpose that number and work it out with a constant on that other side. until it is now equated to 0. Then once it's in that order, then you can find the factors of factorize. So that is basically, if you like, that is basically how you work out that first question. So now let's quickly move on to the next question, being 1.1.2. So you are given that, which looks almost the same as that, but here they've given you a statement to say correct the 2 decimal places, meaning you are going to use a quadratic formula. So this formula of x, it's equals to negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Where does this formula come from, Bantu Bagiti? This is where it comes from. A x squared plus b x plus c, it is equals to 0. So what they did there, it was to actually make x the subject of the formula. So they worked out all of that by trying to make x the subject of the formula, and then this is what they ended up having. That is why you only use this formula when you are given a quadratic equation. You could have also used it there just to know what your final answers should be, but here you did not have to show your steps while using that formula. But for this one, you need to show it because you are going to get a decimal as your answer, which you must now round it off correct to 2 decimal places. Also, it has to be equated to 0. So examiner can try to be tricky and not equate it to 0. If it is not equated to 0 but maybe equated to -1, make sure to transpose, work it out, write it in the standard form, then that's when you are allowed to use that equation. Very, very much important, ladies and gentlemen, over there. So now let's quickly move on. Let me just erase all of that and then we move on to the next question. I notice we've got a linear type of a problem there. Okay, so 1.1.3, can you guys see that we have again a quadratic, but it's not an equation and it is an inequality because of that sign. The moment you see less than, greater than, less than or is equals to, greater than or is equals to, then you know if your variables, one of them is to the power of 2, then you know it's a quadratic inequality. So we don't call it a quadratic equation but a quadratic inequality. An equation, that's when you have an equal sign. That's what we call an equation. But when you have that sign, it's called an inequality. And because it is to the power of 2, we call it a quadratic inequality. If it was just something similar to that, this one, can you see the power is that invisible 1? This is a linear. So because of that sign, then it's called a linear inequality. If, for example, it was something similar to that, then we still have a power of invisible 1. It makes it an inequality. No, a linear. And because of that equal sign, it makes it a linear equation because we see an equal sign. I hope that helped you to be able to differentiate the types of math problems. So someone is there wondering, what if it doesn't have the inequality sign? What if it doesn't have the equal sign also? So that one is called an expression. That's what we call an expression. It doesn't have an equal sign, it doesn't have an inequality sign. So that is where you then simplify when you are given an expression. But when you are given an equation, you solve. You don't simplify, you solve. Similarly, when you have an inequality, you solve. That is why under this question of 1.1, you solve all of those because they have an equal sign or an inequality sign. Very, very much important that you are able to notice the type of a problem that you are dealing with. So there is a special way in which you work out those, but generally what you do, it is just to write it in the standard form where you have x squared and then you have plus 5x there. You transpose that, it becomes positive 4, and then you write that inequality sign as that. So this inequality sign, it does not change when you transpose. When you move something to the other side, it does not change. It only changes if, for example, you had negative x there, blah, 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 and then the inequality sign there. So when you divide by negative 1 on all the terms, it changes a sign also. So that means you are changing that sign. You write it as a positive x squared. You change the sign of the middle term. Maybe it's now negative 3x. You change the sign of that. Maybe it is now minus 1. This thing also, it is a sign. That is why it changes from being that to being that. And then 0, whether you have positive or negative 0 is still the same as just 0. So that is the only time that a inequality sign changes. But if you move a number to the other side, it does not change. It remains as it is. I know most of you guys struggle with that, but I hope what I've just explained to you guys makes perfect sense. Very, very much important, ladies and gentlemen, over there. So quickly, let's discuss that question being 1.1.4. So here you are given square root of x plus 28 equals 2 minus x. Something that you guys need to be aware of is that always when you get to this type of a question that has a square root, all that you want to do is to isolate that square root. I'll give you an example. If you have 2, let's say, plus square root of x minus 1, this is equals to maybe 1. What do I mean by isolating? You want to take everything to the other side until you remain with square root, then this is equals to whatever that you are having on this side, of which is going to be minus 2, and then you remain with square root of that, and then here it's minus 1. That's what you want to do every time when you're given this type of a maths problem. Something that you guys are not aware of, and this is where you get it wrong. I'm going to quickly explain that. So if you are given, let's say, negative 1 plus let's say 2 square root of x plus 1, and maybe this is equals to 4. Let's say you're given something similar to that. You remember, I said you isolate, meaning you are going to remain with 2x plus 1 being equals 2, take that to the other side, and then is 4 plus 1 being 5. Most importantly, guys, when you remove the square root on your next step, you're obviously going to introduce a square on both sides. This square, it must square that 2 and then remove the square root. That's where you guys get it wrong. So this is now what you're going to write. So that means you actually have 4, because 2 squared is 4, into x plus 1 close is equals to 25. So that you say that by that, and then you have 4x plus 4, it's equals to 25, and then you work it out until you get to the final answer. Very, very much important, ladies and gentlemen, that you don't miss that part, because this question is actually all about testing you on those basics. So if you are aware of all of that, then it makes it very much easy for you to be able to correctly answer this type of questions. So in this case, obviously the square root has been isolated already, so you're just going to remove that square root, and you might be having x plus 28 equals 2. Then you have 2 of 2 minus x, and then you do that by that, that by that, that by that, that by that, and then you work it out. I notice you're going to have a quadratic equation, so move everything to that other side and write it in that format of ax squared plus bx plus c, and then you equate it to 0. Then you factorize or find the factors, and then from there you give your final answer. With you doing all of that, they just give you 4 marks, guys. It's not a lot of marks, but adding that with other marks, you get closer to obtaining 150 out of 150. It is possible, guys. Okay. So now let's quickly move on to 1.2. I think I wanted to keep this lesson as short as possible, so I'm just going to quickly take you through those 2 last questions. Solve simultaneously for x and y in the following. So you are given that, and you are also given that. Most importantly, you need to be aware that this is what we call a linear equation. Can you see? The variables or the letters are all to the power of invisible 1. Even x there is to the power of invisible 1. But this one, which you will consider as your equation number 2, can you see? We've got our variables being to the exponent of 2. So that's where you have your quadratic equation on the right side, or otherwise on your equation number 2. So in short, I used to say I just take my linear equation to be equation number 1, and then my quadratic equation to be equation number 2, and then I derive equation number 3 from my easy equation. So linear, it is the one which is easy to derive, where you make either x or y the subject of the formula. How do you know which one to make the subject of the formula? Just look at the equation itself. So can you see this x? It is the one which is just an isolated letter. So that is the one that you can make the subject of the formula, instead of you having to make y, because you're going to end up having y is equals to, let's say, 3 over 2 plus x over 2. Otherwise, just have 3 plus x all over 2. So you don't want to be substituting that function into your equation number 2. So just keep it as simple as possible. So I notice I'm running out of time. Let me not go deep. Let me not go deep into that, but leave it there, so that I don't spend much time on these. So remember, guys, in case if you want to join my live lesson, check under the description of this video. There should be a link that will take you to my Telegram channel or Telegram online classroom, where I conduct live lessons. So I think that last question, I'll actually explain it during the live lesson, but just to quickly read through, they say the roots of an equation are x equals 2, all of that, where m, n, and p are positive real numbers. The numbers m, n, and p in that order form a geometric sequence. You might need to remember something about a geometric sequence. And now they say prove that x is a non-real number. Also, you might need to know what is a non-real number. So this type of questions, you will always get a unique question. It just depends on what examiner has for you, but just expect a unique question. And most importantly, just be aware or remember your grade 10 stuff. Just remember what is a non-real number, and also since grade 10 they've been telling you about a geometric sequence, you might also need to remember characteristics of a geometric sequence. Very, very much important, ladies and gentlemen, that you pay full attention to all the details. Okay, so guys, I do thank you very much for joining. Just make sure that you subscribe, hit that bell notification to be notified of my future uploads, and most importantly, please do like this video if you feel like it did help you. And again, drop some comments in case if you've got a question, a suggestion, or whatever in relation to today's lesson. So good people, thanks very much for joining. My name is Desmond and I'm out.